Miami pulled off a steal of a trade, acquiring top scorer and Norm Powell from the LA Clippers. We break down the trade and look at Powell's fit on the roster, but is this just the first trade of many for Miami? Find out in today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. For daily content on the Heat, click that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you're following us on your podcast app. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Have a jam-packed show for you today. The Heat have played their first two Summer League games and recently opened up a roster spot. Stuff is happening in Miami this offseason, but before we get to all of that, let's start with the breaking news. The Heat have made a trade. It's a three-team deal that sends Kevin Love and Kyle Anderson to the Utah Jazz. John Collins goes from the Jazz to the Clippers, and Norm Powell comes to the Miami Heat. David, I love this move for the Heat. What's your instant reaction to getting Norm Powell?
I love Powell. I remember talking to him as a rookie and saying that this was a player who had a lot of potential when he was with the Toronto Raptors. And of course, they wanted to trade him to the Clippers, and he's just gotten better with age. So you're getting a top scorer, a guy who can attack the rim, has the mid-range game, can shoot from three at a high volume, and provides Miami some of the scoring punch that they needed. When you're making a move to try to acquire a player like Kevin Durant, it's because you're looking to add scoring. Well, guess what? Now you get a player 4 years younger, not at the same level as KD, even at this stage in KD's career, but still a valuable scorer and something that Miami desperately needs in order to help provide some kind of scoring punch to this roster.
They added a guy who averaged nearly 22 points per game last year, was a knockdown three-point shooter, almost made an all-star team last year, was in the running for most improved, had after a career-best season.
Yep.
You got him for next to nothing, with all due respect to Kyle Anderson and Kevin Love. You didn't cost you a draft pick. You opened up a roster spot. Yes, you dip your toe into the luxury tax a little bit, but you and I don't think that this is going to be the last thing that Miami does this offseason, which we'll talk about here in a second. But it's a steal. It's a home run of a trade for the Heat. Just when you talk, Norm Powell is not a perfect player, but given the cost, this is a steal, right? And the Heat had been linked to Bradley Beal for a little while here. I think they got in on Powell and decided 1 year of Norm Powell is probably better than this next year of Bradley Beal, which I would agree. I think Powell is a better player right now than Bradley Beal is. And when you think about what this Heat team needed, they needed outside shooting and scoring in a massive way. And you already had one of the best three-point shooters in the league in Tyler Herro on your roster. You just added another one in Norm Powell. And I do think that Herro and Powell can start together in the backcourt. I have no problem with that whatsoever. You don't really have a traditional point guard in that way, and you are losing something defensively. But maybe, I don't know if that's the vision or not, but they could certainly play together. And even if they don't play together, well, you just replace Duncan Robinson's shooting off the bench with Norm Powell and a better player in Norm Powell also, at a similar salary to what Duncan Robinson was making. So when you kind of take everything together, right now Miami is ahead. And when you consider the value and everything that went out, to me, again, home run of a trade, and I don't think that the Heat are done yet.
If you can acquire a player of Powell's caliber, expiring contract or not, and we should make that clear, the reason why he might just be viewed as a rental by the front office and many of their fans is because his deal is expiring. He's due for an extension. The Clippers, unwilling to give him said extension, wind up trading him. But in order to acquire a player like Powell, if you don't have to give up any kind of draft capital, at least nothing's been reported just yet, although maybe other details shake loose. But as of now, since you don't have to throw in a pick, either it's a first rounder or a second rounder, to get Kevin Love, who missed most of last year. And quite frankly, as much as we love Kevin in the locker room and we appreciate everything he's brought to the team, just wasn't playing at a high enough level to justify his spot on the roster. And Kyle Anderson, who was a late season addition last year and had a spark here and there, brought some versatility and some size to the roster. And yet wasn't really going to be the kind of player that you can build on or incorporate into any kind of long-term plan. So, and you can get a player like Powell. Whatever happens next, at the very least, you got a very, very good player who provides something that Miami desperately needs. And I think that's the vision here, is that, you know what, we still need something. We got a point guard in the draft that we're going to talk about a little bit later in his summer league debut, and that's fine. He's a long-term project. Yet you get a player like Powell, and I don't know about the fit between him and Herro just yet. I'm sure, again, we'll talk about that soon. But in terms of what Powell brings, you can't deny the scoring punch Miami just added. And I think so much easier for everybody else. And I think that's something that's going to be a very underrated aspect of Powell's addition, is that now things kind of open up. He's never been relied on or asked to be that top scorer, but he's been a very good complementary player, whether it was in Toronto or in LA. And I think now, alongside Bam, alongside Tyler, alongside Andrew Wiggins, things are going to change as far as what Miami's capable of offensively.
Yeah, he's a floor spacer for a team that desperately needs it. It does speak
doubt.
a little bit to Miami's direction. At least, like, look, he's not part of the youth movement, but again, expiring contract. There are no long-term ties here right now. But when I talk about direction, I mean, like, what is the product that they want to put on the court? And we know how Eric Spoelstra values spacing and how he's been desperate for spacing in the past. Norm Powell certainly adds to that. Did a little bit of reporting on why this went down, because when you look at the price, I think it's really, it was just Kyle Anderson and Kevin Love. That's all that it took the Heat to acquire Norm Powell. So look, I think that there is, first of all, potential for this to be looped into the Duncan Robinson to Detroit sign and trade for Simone Fontecchio deal. I think that had not officially been called in at the time of this deal being reported. So there's potential for the deal to get expanded, and for that to, I don't know, I don't think that's going to change any of the pieces moving around.
Okay.
But I think that could be part of it in order for it to work. But that's not interesting. The Clippers had, you already said this, but they did not want to give Norm Powell the long-term extension. Part of the reason why they didn't want to give him that extension is because if you look at their moves over the last few years, not wanting to give Paul George an extension, all these things, Kawhi and Harden are signed through 2027, including Harden signing a 2-year deal this summer. The Clippers want cap space in 2027. That's what they want. So giving Norm Powell an extension beyond that just didn't make sense for them. At 30 years old, it didn't make sense. So they wanted to keep things within this window. They get John Collins, who's on an expiring contract, but I don't think there's any expectation for the Clippers to give John Collins an extension. When you consider that Powell was coming off of a career best season, he might have been looking around and been like, look what I just did for you. Are you going to pay me or not? So what I had also heard was that the Clippers had been trying to move Powell for positive value for a few weeks now and couldn't. So I think that they wanted to get Bradley Beal, right? Miami was among the suitors for Bradley Beal, but so were the Clippers, so were the Milwaukee Bucks. And I think they like the idea of bringing in Beal on a 1 or a 2-year deal to align with Kawhi and Harden.
Right.
But they wanted to add Beal without having to either extend Norm Powell or bench Norm Powell. I think they want to get Beal and promise him a starting spot. So I think they realized that it was going to be hard to bench Norm Powell or not give him the extension after the season that he just had. And they didn't view him as a long-term piece. So they've been trying to move him for value. And I don't know that they got it here.
Right.
John Collins is a nice piece for them. But I think when you consider everything that came out, you've got Utah, who's probably going to buy out Kevin Love now. We'll see what they do with Kyle Anderson. But I think the Heat just swooped in here and saw an opportunity to get a good player, and that's what they did.
Yeah, their ability and willingness to be kind of piggybacking on this deal, because again, it almost feels like, and this is not a knock on Anderson and certainly not on Caleb, but it just, they didn't put in as much as you would think would be required to acquire a player like Powell. But from the Clippers' perspective, as you said, you clear that spot, not just the roster, but also in the starting lineup, so that you can add a player like Beal and keep him on that roster to provide some of the same scoring punch that you're giving out in Powell without tying yourself or restricting yourself financially for the future. So it makes sense from the Clippers' perspective, but also why Powell was gotten so easily and for so cheaply, quite frankly. So, it's just, there are questions.
There are questions, but they traded two guys who are not in the rotation for a rotation piece. And that's something that you and I have been talking about all offseason is get more players who could play.
Right.
And they just did that. Now they have their front court is basically Bam Adebayo, Kel'el Ware, and Nikola Jovic now. And that's it. So it feels like something else could be happening there. They opened up a roster spot. They're into the luxury tax now a little bit. It feels like more is coming. The Heat might not be done. We'll tell you what they could do and what might happen after this here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or some high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action, so why not make it a little bit more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Listen, if you start using FanDuel, there's so much to like about it because you can track all of your favorite matchups, and the app keeps it fresh with new daily promotions and fun ways to bet. It's easy to use, it's fast to pay out, and it makes even regular season games feel like must-watch events. If you're new to FanDuel, this is the right time to get involved because new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. So open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com or open the FanDuel app today. We'll be right back.
So here's where the Heat are at now in terms of their salary cap and the roster. So we'll talk about this and then get into what's next here. So the trade sends two players out, brings one in, opens up a roster spot, also increases payroll. So Miami, $1.3 million over the luxury tax. They're also hard capped at the first apron right now, which I don't think that that's a big deal for Miami, or I don't think it was concern at all for them in this deal making, because we know that they don't want to be in the luxury tax in the first place. So what do they care about the first apron? They don't have any plan on getting up to that point. So something else is going to happen here. Now, I don't know when, right? They're 1.3 million over the luxury tax. They want to stay out of the luxury tax in order to reset the clock on the repeater tax, which is very limiting in terms of what you could do with your roster, blah, 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 boring CBA stuff. But they don't have to do it now. They basically have to clear that money before the end of the regular season. So they have time. I suspect that they don't want to wait that long, right? I don't think that they want to wait until the trade deadline to try to basically hope that they can get under the tax, because they were hoping to get under the tax the last trade deadline and they couldn't do it, right? And so that's why they are sort of forced to get out of the tax now. So I think they're going to want to get their homework done this offseason. But they do have an open roster spot, which is the more interesting part of our conversation, David. I do not think that they're going to use that roster spot on Bradley Beal. I think by making this trade right now, there's a lot of reports swirling about Bradley Beal. The Heat were able to offer Beal more than the Clippers or the Bucks because they had access to their full $14 mid-level exception. They could have offered him up to $12 million of that, or almost of it, and stayed under the luxury tax. But I don't know that they had a starting job to offer him. I don't know if he preferred to go to a team like LA, which, again, it seems like that's where things are going. I could be wrong here. Again, we're recording this right after news of the deal broke, but I don't think that the next step is adding Bradley Beal for Miami.
No, we just saw that experiment in Phoenix, like too many guards. I mean, the Booker and Herro comparisons have been made oftentimes before, but yeah, you can't get what Beal provides, which is similar levels of scoring, and have him on that roster if you already have Tyler Herro and now you have Norm Powell there. So it doesn't make sense. Like it sounds like a nice fit. At the same time, I don't. If you can assure Beal, and I don't see why he would want this at this stage of his career, he's going to get paid a lot of money, although he's probably going to give up some in that buyout. At least that's what's been reported. But I don't think that's the opportunity he's looking for, is to continue being a bench player, especially when he never viewed himself as such in Phoenix. And he didn't make a big stink out of it, but he was clearly disappointed. And I think that's the reason why he's willing to accept that buyout. So I don't think Miami can guarantee him anything, whether in terms of money. Obviously, they can't now because of the deal that acquired Powell. They can't offer him minutes or opportunity. It just doesn't make sense. Now, if you've got this open roster spot, you could say, I don't know, maybe add a Hall of Fame level point guard. That seems like a much better deal.
Chris Paul?
Or
no, I know who you're talking about. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, either one. Either one. Honestly, I'd be fine with Chris Paul. I'd be really fine with Chris Paul.
He just said this weekend that he plans to only play one more season. To me, if you're choosing between Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal, Lillard does make more sense, just given that he is more of that natural point guard, right? A guy who you can just run your offense through. Who Beal can do a little bit of that. I don't want to take anything like he could do a little bit of that, but not to the level that Damian Lillard can. On the same side of that, though, Damian Lillard is going to be out for the whole season with Achilles injury, so you'd be looking at something for 2 years from now. Which I don't know how interested Miami is in that. Now, maybe. Right? Like if it's just, hey, let's just get Damian Lillard for something close to the minimum and just figure it out in a couple of years. Okay, I get it. Everything that Miami is doing screams value. Can I tell you, though, what my guess is?
Sure.
I think there might be another 2-for-1 trade coming that reduces payroll. Okay. Miami sends one player out for 2, fills the roster, which, by the way, they don't have to. They're at 14 players. They could stay there if they want. But they could send out one player and get 2. And I'll remind you of a conversation we had last week about a potential Lakers trade. One of the issues in dealing with the Lakers was that every version of a trade that sent Andrew Wiggins out to LA would have added more players to Miami's roster that they can fit. Well, they just opened up a roster spot in this deal. So it feels like maybe there could be something here that sends Andrew Wiggins to the Lakers and brings a couple of players back now to Miami. So it could be for instance, Rui Hachimura plus Dalton Connect comes back and Andrew Wiggins goes out. I wonder if that's something that this clears the way for, which that would reduce payroll. It would get that exact trade would get Miami back under the luxury tax. If the Lakers wanted to include Shake Milton in the deal, they could, whose deal is a completely non-guaranteed, and Miami could waive it and it wouldn't hurt their cap. I believe I have that right. But that could happen here. So that's my guess in terms of what might happen next is maybe it's a Wiggins deal out. 2 players come back. And to your point about the fit with Herro and Powell, it's a little clunky because neither of them is a traditional ball handler or primary ball handler. Well, Norm Powell basically played the 3 last year for the Clippers.
Right.
Could Powell slide into that Wiggins spot at the 3, and then you still have Davion Mitchell and Tyler Herro starting in that backcourt, or wherever they end up going with it. But right now, for what's on the roster, would it be Mitchell, Herro, and Powell with a little bit more floor spacing in that 3 spot now, and an expiring contract, and then you bring Rui Hachimura and Dalton Connect to come off the bench? I don't know, possible.
A lot of options here. I mean, if you look at it from that perspective, you can trade Andrew Wiggins, Kevin Love, and Kyle Anderson, and you get Norm Powell, Rui Hachimura, and Dalton Connect. That's a pretty good haul for Miami. That's a pretty good haul. Like Wiggins has potential, and we've talked about what he could bring to this table. And he unfortunately did not exceed expectations, which might have been a little low to begin with. And so that was a concern, I think. But if you can swing that deal and you get that depth, you get that scoring, and you get some young potential and Connect also, I think that's a really, really good haul for Miami. So I really do like the deal. As far as the partnership with Herro, though, I mean, yeah, I think that's a concern. But yeah, I wouldn't. Powell isn't the defender that Wiggins is. He doesn't have the size nor length. So I don't know if you trust that. I mean, unless you're really bullish on Ware and Adebayo as far as being the defensive anchors of your group.
And Mitchell.
And Mitchell. So that's the other part to consider there. Are those 3 defenders, if you view Ware as that kind of elite rim protector, is that enough to balance out whatever problems you might have with a Herro Powell, pairing? It's a little undersized. He has his defensive issues to overcome. So there are going to be problems with that. And I don't know if Miami is willing to make that kind of, take a step back in that sense defensively from where they've been in the past.
I would argue that maybe they would be if they thought that adding Powell would get them up to league average offensively after being in the bottom 10 in offensive rating for 3 straight years. It's, hey, let's sacrifice a little bit defensively to move up. But at the same time, when you just look at the sheer production, I don't know that Powell is that much more productive than Andrew Wiggins. So it's not exactly like it's this sort of major offensive fulcrum that you're adding to the mix. in order,
Right.
who's a defensive liability, but you're saying, hey, that's the trade-off. This guy's for sure going to get us into the top 15 or 16 in offensive rating finally. I don't know that that's what's going to happen here, which is why I don't think that the Heat are done. It feels like maybe there's something else happening here, which, look, they still need to add somebody to the front court. It's just Kel'el, Bam, and Nikola Jovic as your 3 front court players right now. They need depth there at both of those positions. So the roster right now is a little imbalanced. They're still trying to move Terry Rozier. Not desperate to move him. They're not going to buy him out, I don't think, unless Rozier is willing to give up a ton of money, which could be possible, and that could also get them under the luxury tax. I don't see that as the next obvious step in all of this. So still to come, I'm sure, on the Heat front, but the Heat did play a pair of summer league games over the weekend, and two of their more important young players were honestly a little underwhelming. Should Heat fans be concerned? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. All right, let's talk about Miami's first 2 summer league games in the California Classic in San Francisco over the weekend. Las Vegas Summer League begins this upcoming weekend, but the Heat have been doing this pre-Vegas tournament out in San Francisco for the last several years. They played the Spurs and the Lakers over the weekend. They go 1-1 in those games for those people who care about those things. But more importantly, it was our first look at Kasparas, Jakucionis, and in a Heat jersey. And also some of the concerns that led him to slip to 20, if we're being honest. I'm just going to give you the stats through 2 games here for Jakucionis. 7 points on 1 for 10 shooting from the field. Missed all 7 of his three-point attempts over the weekend. 8 turnovers to just 3 assists, including 5 turnovers in Sunday's loss to the Lakers. It's a slow start for Jakucionis, no doubt about it. My question to you, David, are you concerned?
No, I'm not. You can't take summer league performances too seriously, and I refuse to do so. I think you can still see enough of why he was targeted by Miami in the first place. Really adjusting. Like, I mean, the draft was just not that long ago, and he really hasn't had the opportunity to catch up and make those adjustments. Who knows where he's at? He's had to shift now from workout mode in terms of being able to showcase what he does to the teams that might be looking to draft him, to now playing in full court games and playing at a higher level. And that takes an adjustment. Do I want to see this kind of performance from Kasparas? No, absolutely not. But I still think you can't take it too seriously. We've seen players thrive in summer league and then kind of struggle once they actually get in regular season games. We've also seen the inverse. And until I see otherwise, and we won't know until the regular season begins, I'm kind of lean towards him being able to play at a higher level once the regular season begins. And I'm not too, again, you're building chemistry as a point guard, as a playmaker, the way he is. That takes time. And so you can't expect him to kind of just rush straight into it and be like, I've only met these guys a day or 2 ago, and be expected to kind of thrive in these situations. It just doesn't happen.
Look, I think this was a nice reminder for Heat fans, or a good glimpse for Heat fans that might have not watched a ton of Illinois basketball last year, of who Jakucionis is. Nobody's sitting here telling you that he's the perfect player. He's not Cooper Flagg. He wasn't the first pick in the draft. The turnovers are a concern with him. There's just boneheaded turnovers all the time with him. And that's an issue. It's why he slipped to 20. Okay. Let Miami iron that out. That's what the Heat's development staff is now in charge of, is, hey, if we can reduce these turnovers, there is a good player here who could be very impactful and a positive impact player on both ends of the court. But specifically on offense, where their turnovers have been an issue. In terms of the shooting, I'm not concerned about it. I'm not. It's a 2-game sample size. That's the reason why. I don't care. You can tell me Summer League, NBA Finals. It's a 2-game sample size. All right. I'm not going to draw a ton of conclusions off of that. So relax on that. I watched every shot he took. The form looks fine. I'm not concerned about it. Right. So there it is. The turnovers are concerning. He's young. He's a rookie. He's not a good player yet. The idea is that he will be a good player. So one of the things that I did find interesting in terms of Jakucionis, mostly used off the ball by Miami. Mostly a second side attacker. Ball gets swung to him and he does something with it, usually turning it over, sometimes missing a shot. That's what the first 2 games were for him. But I don't think that the Heat view him as a point guard right now. Not based on how they're using him in Summer League, at least, but they do view him as a ball handler. I think they view him as a ball-moving cog in the offense, but not as a primary playmaker like a Tyrese Halliburton or a LaMelo Ball or a Cade Cunningham. I don't think they look at him like that. I think they look at him as a jumbo-sized guard who could do some playmaking, do some shooting, and do some attacking off the dribble, more like maybe like an Andrew Nembhard type of player. So I do think that that was maybe the most interesting takeaway from the first couple of games from Jakucionis, but I do want to talk about a couple other players here. Kel'el Ware. Ugh. 12 points on 4 of 10 shooting on Sunday, 1 for 3 from 3-point range, just 3 rebounds and a block in 28 minutes. He was a -5 in that loss to the Lakers. The Heat coaching staff have made it very clear to Kel'el Ware his goal this summer in Summer League is to dominate. He should be the best. They think that he should be the best player out there, and he certainly was not. He was okay in their first Summer League win over the Spurs, 14 points on 14 shots. Was definitely more of an impact on the boards and things like that, but he has not been dominant, and they definitely want to see more dominant from him. And it's the same way I came away from these 2 Summer League games like that. Kel'el Ware should be dominating these games. His last NBA experience was in the playoffs, right? That level of competition, and it just doesn't feel like he's bringing that level of intensity to Summer League. And maybe that shouldn't be expected. I get it, but it feels like he should be the best player by far on the court in these games, and he hasn't been.
I think that sums it up perfectly. He should be playing at a higher level. I'm extremely disappointed in what we've seen from him so far, because at his size, he should have a built-in advantage over these players. And I don't know that he looks any better or different than he did last year when he was an undersized rookie, an underweight rookie. And we saw the same flashes. Like, considering what he showed during the regular season against NBA level talent, going into Summer League, he should be the kind of dominant player that we saw Jaime Jaquez become in his second Summer League stint, where he was so good that it was unnecessary for him to continue playing, and they shut him down right away because he was just clearly heads and shoulders above everybody else. And that didn't translate to the regular season. So the fact that Kel'el has almost taken sort of a step back and not be able to make that kind of leap in the California Classic is really disappointing, because he should be controlling these games. He should be an impact player defensively. He should be able to finish down low. He should be able to stretch the floor with ease. All these things should come naturally and easily for him, and that's not the case. And I'm a little concerned also about what just kind of appears to be a lackluster level of effort, like that he doesn't know exactly what's at stake here. And you're trying to prove that this is the same concerns that dogged him coming out of college. And I thought those have been erased and eradicated during the regular season, but the motor, the intensity, none of those were evident in these kind of games in Summer League. And you could say, oh, it's just Summer League. We've seen guys, you and me personally, on the floor, diving for loose balls, trying to earn their place, even if they're a lottery pick. You've got to be able to show that kind of effort, and I'm just not seeing it from Ware.
It might just be a matter of, hey, I'm the starting center next year anyway. I'm not going to get injured out here. I'm not going to, and taking it for granted. Doesn't make it excusable. I also don't want to raise too many red flags after just 2 Summer League games here.
Sure.
I call the California Classic like the sleepy Summer League. It just, there's like nobody in the stands. Like nobody really cares. Like, I don't know. But so we'll see. But look, it's not a concern, but it's something to keep an eye on, I guess is the best way to put it. But I'm telling you, I'm watching Kel'el Ware, and I can't help but think this is the guy that they kept out of Kevin Durant talks at all costs. It's like you'd like to see a little bit more after the way that Kel'el Ware has been talked about this summer. Maybe we will. One last note that I want to do on Summer League, though, and this is a high note. Bryson Warren looks good, man. He had 18 points on Sunday, 5 of 10 shooting overall, 3 for 6 from 3-point range, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals in 26 minutes. And I think people forget this. So Bryson Warren, for people who don't know who he is, he's spent the last 2 years in Sioux Falls with Miami's G League program and has been a staple of that program for the last couple of years. He's still just 20 years old. He was a guy that was a 4-star recruit out of college, went to Overtime Elite. Like a lot of guys out of the OTE program, it was NBA teams didn't really know what to do with them. It's not really like the college game or the NBA. So whatever. He ends up basically, he ends up in the G League and in Miami's development program. So he's been there for 2 years. He's still only 20 years old, and he looks really good. And the way that the Heat coaching staff is talking about him, I do think that he might have the inside track on Miami's final two-way spot. But a lot of that can change because we have a lot more Summer League to go. Next Summer League game is on Tuesday. But for now, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen today. For your second listen, find the Locked On NBA podcast where there is no offseason. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.